Don't forget to like and subscribe to Jolie Knots Crochet. Share with your friends. Hit that little notification bell so you can get notified when new patterns release. All our videos are available in left and right-handed tutorials. Hi everyone, welcome back to Jolie Knots Crochet. I'm Crystal and today we are going to be making this awesome kids Batwing sweater. Now I do have an adult size and I will leave the link in the description box for the adult size as well. This one is designed to fit the kids a little bit more baggy. You can do some extra increase rows in order to get it past their elbow, or it will sit just at their elbow the way that it's designed. Now, how we're going to be working this sweater is from the bottom band. We'll work back and forth in rows at the bottom band and then begin working the body of the sweater in V-stitches. We will be increasing those V-stitches to create the Batwing look, and then finish out by opening the arms and seaming up the shoulders. Now here's some photos of the adult size Batwing sweater, and like I said, I'll leave the link in the description box below. Both patterns are available in video and written format. The child sizes available are the extra small to extra large, and adult sizes are sized from extra small to 4XL.
For this pattern today, I am going to be using Lion's brand Flicka. Now this is a 3-weight yarn, and in this skein there are 196 yards. This is a 50% cotton and a 50% polyester blend. I will go ahead and leave scrolling up on the screen for the approximate yardage per size that you are going to need. Now we are going to be using 2 different hook sizes, a 5mm hook for the band and a 6mm hook for the body of your sweater. You are also going to be needing 3 stitch markers, a tapestry needle, and some scissors. Okay. Go ahead and grab your materials and we will get started. Alright, so in order to get started, we are going to take a slip knot and we're going to chain 11. Now into your second chain from the hook, you are going to place a single crochet, and then we're going to single crochet into every chain space all the way down. So you should have 10 single crochets. All sizes are going to have 10 single crochets. Now for row 2, this is going to be our repeat row. We're going to chain 1 and turn our work, and then we're going to single crochet into the back loop only of every single crochet. So you should still have 10 single crochets, and going into the back loop only is going to help us and allow us to have an expandable stretchy band. So our size guide is based off of hip measurements, and your band should be smaller than your hip measurement. So for your repeat, you are going to repeat row 2. I'll go ahead and leave scrolling up on the screen how many rows per size you're going to need. Okay, here I am. I've completed my band. Once you've got the correct amount of rows for your size that you're doing, we're going to chain 1 and we're going to fold our band in half. and we're going to work our slip stitch row to join. Now we're going to work it very, very similar to how we made our rows. So what we're going to do is bring your bottom of your band or the other side of your band behind your work. Once you have chained one, we're going to go into the back loop only of your first stitch, and then we're going to go into the first chain space on the other end, and we're going to slip stitch. Back loop only of your next stitch into the chain space on the other side and slip stitch. And you're going to do that 10 times. Once you've got that slip stitch, you're going to flip your band so that your seam is now on the inside. So flip that, turn your work around. And now what we're going to do is chain one, and we're going to work a half double crochet into the side of every row. So your first row is here, and the top of that row is right here. So that's our first half double crochet. Our next half double crochet is into the top of the next row. And you should have, at the end of this round, the same amount of half double crochets as you had of your single crochet rows. Go ahead and complete your first row, and then we'll be switching to a 6mm hook to begin the rest of our body. Okay, so I'm here completing my half double crochet row, and I'm just going to slip stitch to join. And now I'm going to switch from my 5mm hook to my 6mm hook. And I'm going to chain 4. Now this is going to count as a double crochet and a chain 1 here and throughout the pattern. I'm going to double crochet into that same stitch we slip stitched into, and now I've just created my first V-stitch. Now I'm going to skip one stitch and into the next put another V-stitch. Skip one stitch and into the next we'll put another V-stitch, and that's your repeat. Skip one, V-stitch in the next. Skip one, V-stitch in the next. So what's going to happen now is if you're going to take the amount of rows that you had and divide that by 2, and that's how many V-stitches you should have all the way around the bottom of your sweater. Okay, here I am with my last V-stitch of the round, and I am just going to slip stitch to my first chain 4 to join. From there I'll chain 4 again, counting as my double crochet and my chain 1 space, double crochet into the same space to create a V, and then continue along with my V's. And I'm going to repeat this V-stitch row. We're going to repeat this V-stitch row until we have 8 total rows. Now our first row was the half double crochet row,
and then we'll have 8 rows of V-stitches. So I am going to work up my rows of V-stitches, and then we will meet each other back so I can teach you how to begin your increase rows.
Okay, so here I have increased my rows of V-stitches. I don't have any increases on the end. Your work should start curving because we did increase here with our half double crochets. We skipped 1 stitch and put a V-stitch, 1 stitch, put a V-stitch. So your work should be with a large curve, like this, okay? So now what we're going to do is we are going to mark each side. We're going to mark the side here to represent the side of our work. And with the same amount of V-stitches on the front and the back, we will then mark here. And that's where we're going to do our increases for the next so ever many rows that I will let you know. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is when we join with our chain 4, this is going to be a little bit differently because we're going to set ourselves up to work before this V-stitch. So we're going to join with a single crochet. Now this single crochet is going to separate these 2 V-stitches, one for the front and one for the back, and I am going to place my single crochet over that stitch. I'm sorry, I'm going to place my stitch marker over that single crochet. I'm going to scroll up on the screen how many V-stitches you should have per size. You'll take half of that amount of V-stitches, and we'll put a stitch marker on this side to separate the front and the back. Okay, so here is my last V-stitch of the front, and then my first V-stitch of the back. So I'm going to put my second stitch marker in between those 2 V-stitches. Okay, now getting started with our increase. Our increases are going to be a 2-row repeat. So for each row, we will increase 1 V per stitch marker. So essentially you'll have 2 increases per row. So the first increase, the way we're going to work that is we are going to chain 4. That will count as your first double crochet and your first chain space. And then we're going to double crochet right over that stitch marker, right over the stitch, the single crochet. So this now is the increased V-stitch for this row, and this will now be considered, well, the center, I guess the center of the side. So I'm going to move my stitch marker up, and this will now be the new center for this row. Now working down the front, we will make a V-stitch into every V-stitch to the next stitch marker. So go ahead and do that, and I will meet you back over there. Okay, so I've reached my next stitch marker. This is the second increase of my row. Remember, we're increasing twice, 1 V-stitch per stitch marker. So in between these 2 V-stitches, that's where I'm going to add my increased V-stitch. And this is now my center point. So I'm going to take my stitch marker out and move it up to my new center point, even though it's on the side. Now I'm going to work V-stitches into every V-stitch back to the front where we began, and I will meet you back to show you how we are going to join.
Okay, here I am at the end of row 9.
This is my first increase. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to slip stitch into the 3rd chain to join, and then I'm going to slip stitch over one more chain. So my increase here, I'm going to turn this 1 V-stitch into 2. So I'm going to put 2 V-stitches. However, our first V-stitch is going to be right now, and our last V-stitch, the second one, is going to be when we come back around. We're going to work over that slip stitch here. So I'm going to chain 4, double crochet into the same V-stitch, and I'm not going to move my stitch marker just yet. I'm going to now work my V-stitches on top of every V-stitch down to my next stitch marker, and then I will show you how we work our increase.
Okay, here is how our next increase is going to work for round 10.
My center V-stitch is here. Remember, we are putting 2 V-stitches, we're increasing a V-stitch. So we're going to add 2 V-stitches into that 1 V-stitch. And then what I'm going to do is move my stitch marker up and place it between these 2 V-stitches. And when you get to the next round, you'll repeat
like we did in round 9.
And that's where your V-stitch increase will be. Now I am going to V-stitch into every V-stitch back to the beginning, and I will meet you right back there so I can show you how we are going to join and complete the round with our next V-stitch increase. Okay, here we are at the end of round 12. And this is where we added our first V-stitch into our middle V-stitch. So now we need to put our second one. So just working over that slip stitch, we're going to go ahead and add our second V-stitch. And then just like we did down here, we are going to single crochet to join.
We'll repeat like we did in round 9.
By chaining 4, working your double crochet over your V-stitch, and now this is your added V-stitch increase for the next round. I am going to leave this stitch marker here. Well, I'm actually going to move it a little. This will be the first row of my increase, and this is just going to help me for when I count my increases to know where my first row of my increase started. And if you will want to go ahead and grab one more stitch marker and place it in that V, because this is where we will then do our next increase in the next round.
You're going to repeat rounds 9 and 10. I'm going to leave scrolling up on the screen how many repeats you're going to need per size in order to grow your sweater in lengthwise or widthwise as well as lengthwise. Now, if your child is on the larger side or the taller side of that size, then you want to do one extra increase.
Meet me back here when you're finished with your repeats, and I'll show you how we are going to separate panels for our front and our back. Once you are done with your repeats, we're going to start to work back and forth in separate panels for the front and the back so that we can create an armhole. Now, this will not have any increasing or decreasing. What we're going to do is, once you have slip stitched, this is your first V of the row, and this is your last V of the back row. So I'm going to chain 3, and that's going to count as a beginning double crochet. And now I'm going to put 1 V-stitch into the first V-stitch. From there, I'm going to place 1 V-stitch on top of each V-stitch all the way down. I'm going to continue that, and I will meet you back at the next stitch marker. Okay, so here is the last V-stitch of this side, and remember, we're just working back and forth without any increasing or decreasing. This is not a V-stitch, this is the center. So this is the first V-stitch of, this is the last V-stitch of the side, and then this is the first one of the next side. So how I'm gonna end this row is just put a double crochet right into the last part of that V. And that is the end of the first row for the amount of repeats that you need for your size. So now we're going to chain 3, turn your work, and we're going to do the same thing now going back down the other side. So my first V-stitch is going to be in my first V-stitch, and you'll work your V-stitches all the way down for your correct amount of rows. When you get to the end, you will end with a double crochet on top of your chain 3, and then when you turn your work, your first V will be in this V-stitch. Okay, so do that for the correct amount of rows, and then do it for the other side as well. So you have 2 sides that are now then split open, and I will meet you back here so we can get started on sewing up the neckline and finishing up all our finishing touches. Okay, everybody, here I am. I have completed my rows for my armholes. Now, you're going to want to make sure that you leave a long tail for sewing up your shoulder and your arm seam. What we're doing here is we are finding our middle V-stitches. I will leave on the screen for you how many V-stitches per size you should have for the middle. Now, once I count them out, or once you count yours out, you're going to put a stitch marker between those V-stitches through both sides, your front and your back. And this is going to be the opening for your neck hole.
Feel free to customize this opening for the size that you would like. I had some of my testers leave extra V-stitches open if they wanted a wider neck or if they wanted it to sit off the shoulder a bit. So you can customize the neck opening to what your desired opening is.
From there, we'll move to the side, and then we'll begin whip stitching from our arm all the way up to the neck, and then we'll do the same thing on the other side. So here's how we're going to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the long tail end that we left and thread our tapestry needle. Starting from our first stitch, we're going to go through the top 2 loops, so through your V-stitch. And then on the other side, one side's going to be a double crochet, one side's going to be a chain 3, and then we're going to go through the chain 3 on the other side and pull through. Now we just want to make sure that as we're pulling our stitches through, they don't tangle up. Now I'm going to go through the V-stitch, the double crochet in my V-stitch, and through the double crochet in my V-stitch on the other side, and pull it through my chain, and through the chain on the other side and pull that through the double crochet, the V's on the double crochet, and the same on the other side. And you're just going to keep doing that all the way up until you get to your neck, the stitch marker for your neck, and you'll do the same on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and we've got one last step to do before we're completed. We're going to work on our neckline to finish up the neckline. All right, so finish whip stitching your guys's together, and I'll meet you right back here. Okay, so I have just completed sewing up my seams for my arms, and now I'm left with my neckline. What we're going to do is we're just going to finish this up with a single crochet row to eliminate the stretch that it's going to give. Otherwise, it's going to stretch way too much. So I am going to attach my yarn. I'm going to attach my yarn to one of the ends, so I have one less end to sew in. And what I'm going to do I am going to put my hook into the first double crochet of the side and pull up a loop. Chain one for height, and now I'm going to single crochet into every double crochet and chain space all the way around, and that's it. That's our super simple closing up the neckline and finishing that off is just single crocheting into every stitch and chain space that presents itself. Okay? Thank you everybody for watching Jolie Knots Crochet. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. You can follow me on Facebook under Jolie Knots Crochet. And if you're not a member of our Jolie Knots Crochet community group on Facebook, find us and share with us what you've created.